Hey, greetings guitar buddies, Martin Smith here. I want to tell you all about a new amplifier I've got that's getting me closer to Ed's hallowed Brownsound than I've ever got before. This is the One by Marshmello amps. So disclaimer first off, this is not a paid review. I didn't get the amp for free, I paid a lot of money for it. It's not available in shops, I'm afraid. So this isn't a traditional, let me tell you about a piece of gear that you can go and buy. But I did want to show you this because I think it's showing the way as to how you can make an amp sound like Ed's Brownsound. This thing sounds like that out the box, and so I really want to show you what it's doing. For a kickoff, this thing looks like a super lead, right? Beautiful head shell. I mean, Ossie's done a magnificent job on this. It's got beautiful gold piping around it. It's got the vintage Tolex. It's got a lovely brass-topped handle, and it's got nice plexi faceplate on it. To all intents and purposes, apart from the fact that it says Marshmello and not Marshall, that looks like a super lead, and it's a really beautiful thing to have. But it belies its internals, right? It doesn't give any secrets away from the front panel. You'd just think it was a stock sounding Marshall type amp, but it's not, and its architecture is really unique. So let me tell you a bit about the architecture of the amp. Unlike a Marshall's 100-watt super lead, this thing isn't loud at all. And you might know from Ed's history that people heard his amp in person, and they were very confused as to how quiet his Marshall was. It wasn't putting out anywhere like 100 watts. I think that's part of the secret to what you can do to a Marshall to make it sound more like Ed's. So under the hood in this thing, you've got the beginnings of a super lead plexi, I think, in the preamp stage, and the power amp valves. But there's some magic going on, and what this magic provides is a variac inside, or a modified transformer to give you basically a variac type feature. And it's got an internal load. So there's an output on the back, which I'll show you in a minute, which is actually a line output, which can go straight into another power amp or a mixing desk or anything you like. And then it's got the other outputs that you'd expect on an amp. So that's an unusual feature. You can unplug the speakers and just plug the line in. You will not fry the amp. It's totally loaded and protected, which is a fantastic feature. And part of this magic that's going on in the amp is to do with the interaction between the speaker impedance, the output transformer. What you end up with is an amp that you can talk over at full volume. It's crazy. But plug that into another amp in a slaving sort of fashion, and you can have it as loud as you want, locking in that core tone and then allowing you to just whack it up to any sort of stage volume you like. So it's very, very unique architecture of this amp. It has the gain in there built in that you'd expect from Ed's amp, so it sounds as over-the-top steroidal Marshall as Ed's did, but it's controllable. You've obviously got gain, you can turn that down and you can get a cleaner sound. So it enables you to get the variations in Ed's sound that you heard over the albums. So Van Halen 1, most of the tracks were pretty high octane. Van Halen 2's a lot softer, well, a bit softer, less gainy. And then through the years it sort of oscillated between less gain and more gain. This will do the lot. So why don't we have a look at the amp? This is the Marshmello One. This is built by Ossie Ahsen. Ossie has a company called Three Monkeys, and they make solderless cables right now, but they have made exceptionally good amps. And Ossie really knows his way around custom circuits to make something sound correct. Not to build something that's slavishly always the same as a vintage. You can do that till the cows come home. But Ossie's got like tone dissemination skills, and he's a Van Halen fan. And he knows what that sound is intimately, and he's made this thing which replicates that tone. You can hit Ossie up and ask him for details of how he makes it, or even if he'd make one for you. I'll let Ossie deal with all that stuff. But for now, I'm going to describe what this is right here. Apart from the fact that it's got Marshmello on it, this is as slavishly close as you can get to the front panel of a super lead. We've got an on-off, we've got a standby, we've got presence, bass, middle, treble, volume 1, volume 2, right? All the normal stuff you get on a Marshall super lead. Where's all the trickery? Where's all the switching? Well, it's inside and it's on the back panel. So let me show you the back panel. turn this thing round. On the rear panel, you can see what's really going on with this amp. The first thing that's very non-standard is it's got a line output. The line output is going to allow you to plug the locked-in tone of the amp, power amp and all, through a mixing console if you wish, through effects if you wish, or you can plug it into another power amp and you can amp up this volume to something that's more right for stage and band use. So that's a really powerful thing. Then next on is the ground lift, usual, and then we've got a level which actually provides attenuation for that line output, so you can run it from nothing to everything. Next you've got two speaker outputs. You do not have to plug speakers into the speaker outputs with the amp on. Very unusual feature because it's got a built-in load inside. So it's a super safe amp in that regard, but its function is that you can use it in the way that some people, myself included, suppose that Ed may have done at certain times. Next switch is the bedroom switch. This thing will literally take it down to something that you wouldn't annoy somebody in the next room with. Still the full tone locked in. Pretty great. Then we've got the speaker impedance switch. On a Marshall, usually, you just set it for the impedance of the speaker, right? Not on this. So this is highly interactive with the gain of the amp. On 4 ohms, this is the lowest gain level. And then as you turn it to 8, you get an increased gain. And maximum gains on 16. So if you're looking for Van Halen 1, let's think, I'm the One or something like that, something really over the top gain wise, 16 ohms is going to get you there easily. Then you've got your fuse and you've got your mains. And the mains fuse, pretty much all there is to this amp. It's all on the inside. So, apart from adjusting the gain staging and using the amp output that you feel matches your purpose, the rest of it, nothing to worry about, nothing to touch. You can't fry the thing, but it does sound the business. Alrighty then, I'm plugged in. Alright, so like on 1, let's see what we get. So it's bitey. Touch more juice. Final frontier, we're on full. Thick wads of saturated sustain. We're going to have a spot of lunch and it'll still be ringing. So what we've got going on at the moment is into input 1, pretty much everything's on full. I've just dialed down the middle a little, just to back off the mids a tiny touch. Ed was really weird about mids. Like if anybody listens to his sound, they'd say that's a really middly guitar sound. And then he said he hates mids. And then you see his EQ and he boosts mids. I don't know what's going on with his mid thing. I have some ideas though, but that's for another video. But anyway, so I've dialed back the mids, but everything else is on 10, apart from volume 2. So volume 2 will add a little bit more bass. If I turn volume 2 off, start to pump it. So I quite like it. Put it back up. Okie dokie. On the back panel we've got this impedance switch which will give us more or less gain. Currently it's on 16 ohms, so it's on maximum gain. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit and you'll hear the difference. Less volume. Still too much gain for that, right? Alright, so this is on 4 ohm tap now. Let's see what gain this is. Let's pump up the impedance again. Alright, we're back on max impedance for full gain. Screams well. Alright, so we've heard the amp plug directly through its speaker outputs, but now I'm going to do what I like to do, which is to slave the first head into another head. In this instance, I'm slaving the Marshmello into a Badger 18 watt by Sir. And the reason I'm doing this is because I find that by plugging one amp into another amp, you can get different characteristics of both interacting. Like, you know that the Marshall's kind of a bit of a hard hitter, you know, it's not soft and valvey, it's kind of more like bangy, you know, it's got a hard edge to it. And especially because this is brand new components, and as close as it is to the architecture of Ed's amp and all that good stuff, it's still brand new stuff. I think the valves are NOS, but the rest of it's brand new. So it's not necessarily broken in yet. And so for that and many other reasons, I've plugged it into the Badger, right? And the Badger's got an interesting power section. So it's got two 6v6s and cathode bias. And I think those characteristics are giving the amp a slightly less kind of harsh top. You know, it's a slightly more mellow, transient response. It's a bit more velvety than razory. And that I really like, you know. And also it responds really nicely, so that the line out comes out of this and it goes into the effects return of this. So none of the preamp section of the Badger's working. It's just the power section, essentially, that we're hearing. And well, let's have a listen to how it sounds. So it's got just as much saturation, but it's also got a little bit more roundness to it and a tiny bit more scoop. The EQ section of this amp really works when you've plugged into the return. For some reason it gives you like a lot more sonic scope to boost bass, treble and middle. essentially what you're getting with 2 amps. I think it's the best way to use amps in a Van Halen potential, because you get to push the first amp into the second amp as hard or as soft as you want to get different amounts of power amp distortion. Not preamp distortion, power amp distortion. I think that's quite useful for the VH sound. Hey, I'm just cutting in here quickly to say, if you're finding this video useful, helpful, or even mildly entertaining, please consider pressing the like and the subscribe. More people will get to see this footage on my channel, and you'll get to see the next video that comes out. Thank you. Alright, so I'll show you what this amp sounds like with the Explorer. Actually, this was painted over when I bought the guitar, and it was really unclear what the guitar was. I was like, oh, could it be the Destroyer? But no, it's a nice Epiphone. So I've got a vintage Super 70 humbucker in here, which is the one that potentially came in Ed's guitar, and maybe he used it, maybe he didn't, we don't know. So we're going to hear how this sounds like with the Marshmello slaved into the Sur. Enjoyed this run through of the Marshmello 1. In the next few videos I'll probably try to expand on what you can do with this amp and its line out potential. As you know, Ed used to do a wet dry rig by taking a line out from his main amp, feeding the effects and then feeding power amps. So there's obviously a lot you can do with this, but there's talk about Don Landry used to possibly take a line output signal from Ed's head. This is something Don used to do way back. And if that's the case, there's a possible addition in the sound that you hear on those early albums of a DI signal. Now that would give you a strange extra bandwidth that you don't hear coming out of a Marshall Greenback cab. Like a Marshall Greenback cab doesn't have a lot of high end, and that's where the theory of the JBL comes in, because Ed had a lot of high end in his signal, especially on the first album. But that can be found by using a DI signal, and this amp's got a DI. So in the next few videos I'll probably expand on that and try to get as close as we can to the first album sound using the amp and not using too much post kind of tinkering, you know. I kind of want to do it in a purist way as much as possible, even though it's not a Marshall Super Lead. But you know what I'm saying. Amp head, speakers, possibly a DI, and we'll see where that gets us. So if you've enjoyed this video, tune into the next one, and I shall see you soon.